If you'd asked me back then whether I trusted my wife, I wouldn't have paused. Trust wasn't something I thought about, it was just there, like gravity. We'd built a routine, a rhythm. Morning coffee together. Inside jokes that only made sense to us. Arguments that ended with apologies, not silence. I believed we were solid. Not perfect, but real. That's why it didn't make sense when doubt crept in the way it did. Quietly, uninvited, wearing a familiar face. It happened at her company's corporate holiday party. One of those events everyone pretends to enjoy because it looks good to be seen enjoying it. She worked for a large marketing firm downtown, the kind where people talk about culture more than results and treat after-hours drinking like a job requirement. I'd been to a few of these before. Always awkward, always loud, always exhausting. She asked me to come, said it meant a lot if I did. I remember that specifically. Meant a lot. I took time getting ready, more than usual. I wanted to look like the husband who belonged there. Confident, supportive, unbothered. I didn't know I was already walking into a moment that would split something open in me. She arrived early to help set things up. I showed up later, weaving through clusters of people holding stemless wine glasses and laughing too hard at jokes that weren't funny. The venue was one of those converted warehouses. Exposed brick, soft amber lighting. Music just loud enough to make conversation feel in asterisk mate without being private. I spotted her across the room almost immediately. She looked incredible. Not in a flashy way, not trying too hard, just confident. Comfortable. Like someone who knew she belonged exactly where she was. That alone should have made me happy. Instead, my stomach tightened, because she wasn't alone. Her manager, Greg, stood close to her. Closer than necessary. I'd met him once or twice before. Polished, charismatic, the type who knew exactly how to make people feel seen. The kind of guy companies love and spouses quietly dislike without knowing why. I watched as he leaned in and wrapped his arms around her. First, I thought it was a quick greeting. But it didn't end quickly. She leaned into him. Not stiffly. Not politely. Her shoulders relaxed. Her head tilted slightly toward his neck. His hand settled low on her back, fingers spread in a way that suggested familiarity, not formality. The hug lingered. Too long. Too natural. It wasn't obscene. Nothing you could point at and say, that's it. That's proof. But it carried weight. Memory. Comfort. The kind of closeness you don't build in conference rooms. I felt frozen. Standing there with a drink I hadn't tasted. Watching my wife share a moment that didn't include me. The room kept moving around me. Laughter. Music. Clinking glasses. But something inside me went very still. When she finally pulled away and noticed me, her face lit up. She smiled, walked over, kissed my cheek like everything was normal. "Hey, you made it," she said, cheerful, easy. I smiled back, or at least I think I did. We made small talk. She handed me a drink, commented on the food. But my eyes kept drifting back to Greg, who now stood across the room pretending not to notice us. He didn't look uncomfortable. He looked relaxed. Like someone who didn't feel threatened. I waited. I didn't want to accuse. I didn't want to embarrass her. I told myself I'd bring it up lightly, casually. No tension. "So," I said when we were standing near the bar, "you and Greg seem pretty close." She laughed immediately. Too fast. Like she'd rehearsed it. "Oh my God, are you serious?" she said. "That's just how he is. He hugs everyone." I shrugged. Didn't really look like a group thing. Her smile tightened, just a fraction. "Babe, it's office culture. You don't work in marketing. It's different. Everyone's stressed. Everyone's touchy. You're reading way too much into it." I didn't argue. I just looked at her. She sighed and softened her tone, reaching for my arm. "Look, I know things have been tense lately. You've been tired. Maybe you're just feeling a little insecure." There it was. The shift. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about what I'd seen. It was about me. My mood. My perception. My supposed jealousy. I felt stupid for even bringing it up. That was the worst part. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't get defensive. She made it sound reasonable. Logical. Like I'd imagined the whole thing. and I let it go. I joked about being paranoid. She smiled, relieved. The moment passed, but it didn't disappear. The rest of the night, I noticed things I hadn't before. How often Greg found reasons to stand near her. How she laughed a little louder around him. How he never once met my eyes directly. Not hostility, avoidance. On the drive home, she talked about work. About clients. About how exhausting the year had been. I responded at the right times, but my mind kept replaying that hug in slow motion. Later, lying in bed beside her while she slept with her back turned, I stared at the ceiling and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. It wasn't anger. It was doubt. Not about her hug, but about how easily she made me doubt myself. And once that door opened, it didn't close again. You know how, after something breaks, you start noticing all the cracks that were already there? That's what the days after the holiday party felt like. I kept replaying that moment, her with Greg, and at first I told myself it was a one-off. A boundary crossed, maybe, but not a betrayal. Not yet. But that doubt I felt, it didn't just fade. It grew roots. Quietly. Under everything. And then I started remembering things. Not dramatic red flags, nothing you'd catch in real time. Just oddities. Moments that had felt off at the time but not worth pressing. I'd brushed them aside, like most people do when they don't want to rock the boat. But now, with the benefit of suspicion, those memories started to rearrange themselves into a pattern I couldn't ignore. Like how, about 2 months earlier, she started falling asleep on the couch more often. It had started slowly. At first, she claimed she was watching shows I didn't like, trashy reality dating competitions or those mystery podcasts she was into. She'd say she didn't want to keep me awake, so she'd crash on the couch. But eventually it became the norm. More nights than not, I'd go upstairs alone. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and realize she still hadn't come to bed. I remember asking once, "You okay? You've been sleeping out there a lot lately." She'd laughed it off. "Honestly, the couch is just comfier than it should be. You know how my back gets." And I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Because the alternative, that something was wrong between us, or worse, that something else was pulling her away, didn't fit into the story I had about our marriage. Back then, I was still clinging to the idea that every couple goes through weird phases. That this was just one of ours. But the couch wasn't the only thing. Her phone habits changed. She used to be careless with it. Left it face up, unlocked half the time, sometimes even forgot it in the car overnight. But around the same time as the party, I started noticing it was always face down. Always on silent. She carried it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. At first, I assumed it was work stress. Her team was in the middle of a big campaign, and she was constantly emailing clients. But it wasn't just more phone use. It was different. I remember once, stupid, but it stuck with me. I picked up her phone to hand it to her, and the screen lit up. I didn't try to unlock it or anything. But she snatched it out of my hand like I'd grabbed something private. "Sorry," I said. "Just handing it to you." She gave me a tight smile. "It's just been a crazy day. I've got like 5 things going on in there." Again, I let it go. But I shouldn't have. And then there were the smells. Once, I hugged her when she got home. One of those spontaneous kitchen hugs while she was taking off her coat. And I caught this scent on her neck. Cologne. Subtle, not overpowering. But it wasn't mine. Not something I'd ever worn. Not something I'd smelled on her before either. It wasn't bad, it was just wrong. It didn't belong. "You smell different," I said, half laughing. She blinked, then sniffed herself. "Oh, weird. Probably from the Uber driver." I sat up front this time, he had some seriously strong stuff on. I nodded. Made a joke about men who bathe in aftershave. But inside, a voice said, "That's not it." It wasn't a one-time thing, either. The scent showed up again a week later. Faint, but distinct. That time, she blamed it on people spraying stuff at the office, and said something about the janitor switching cleaning products. There were other things, too. Little anomalies. Wine glasses in the sink when I hadn't been home. Once, there was a lipstick stain on the rim, pale pink. She rarely wore lipstick. Maybe on holidays. Not random Tuesdays. When I asked her about it, She said she tried a new lip tint that morning and didn't like it, so she wiped it off before work. The glass, she said, was from when she got home and poured herself a half glass of red to decompress. It sounded plausible, but it didn't feel true, and the distance between us kept growing. Conversations felt shorter, mechanical. We still did all the married people things, grocery runs, dishes, even the occasional takeout and movie night, but there was a hollowness to them. She smiled when she was supposed to, laughed at the right times, but it was like she was going through the motions. S*X became rare, then non-existent. That's when I really started to feel it. The wall between us. I tried to bring it up once, carefully. We haven't, been close lately. She was folding laundry. Didn't even look up. Yeah, I've just been exhausted. Work is a mess. I nodded. I get that. I just miss us. That got her attention. She looked up, and for a second, something flashed in her eyes. Sadness? Guilt? Couldn't tell. I miss us too, she said, and for a brief moment, I believed her. But then she added, I just need a little time. Okay? Things have been overwhelming. I didn't push. I didn't want to be the guy who pressures his wife when she says she's overwhelmed. So I said okay. And I waited. And waited. But the warmth didn't come back. What came instead was this dull ache. This sense that I was walking around in a life that used to fit but no longer did. I couldn't point to anything specific. Nothing big. But when you stack enough small lies together, they start to feel like the real thing. And I was drowning in small lies. I began to notice how often she worked late. She'd text me at 6:30 or 7 o'clock saying she was staying for last-minute edits or a quick brainstorm. I didn't question it at first. She was ambitious, always had been. But then I noticed something. She always texted after the time she was supposed to leave. Never before. It was like she waited until I might notice she wasn't home, then crafted a reason. Just enough detail to sound believable. Never so much that I could verify it. I started eating dinner alone, watching shows by myself, falling asleep in the quiet hum of a house that used to feel full. I'd hear her come in sometimes, shoes clicking on hardwood, the soft rustle of her jacket being removed. I'd pretend to be asleep just to avoid the strange, polite version of her she wore when we were alone. I'd lie there, listening to her breathe from across the bed, or sometimes from the other room, and I'd wonder what was left of us. What parts were still real, and what parts I'd imagined into existence because I was too scared to face the alternative. And somewhere in that swirl of ignored moments, late-night silences, and fading warmth, I realized something I'd been too afraid to say out loud. I didn't trust her anymore. I didn't have proof, but I didn't need it. I felt it, and sometimes that's worse. There's a strange moment, a razor-thin space between suspicion and truth, when everything in your life hangs in limbo. That's where I was living, walking around like a man in a house with a gas leak, unsure if I was imagining the smell or if the walls were about to explode. I had no hard evidence, just signs, feelings, fragments. But that changed on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of rain that soaks through your jacket in seconds and makes the whole world feel gray. I had finished a client meeting across town earlier than expected and thought, maybe I'll surprise her, maybe bring dinner, maybe try to reconnect, even if part of me wasn't sure what was left to connect to. I remember the bag of Thai food in my passenger seat. I remember the steam fogging up the windows as I parked in front of the house. I remember how normal everything looked from the outside. But as soon as I stepped in, I knew something was wrong. First, the smell. Not bad, not alarming, just unfamiliar. Cologne again. Not mine. Not subtle this time either. Sharp and expensive. I stood in the entryway, drenched, holding dinner, listening. Nothing. No sound of the TV. No movement. Just that still, eerie quiet that shouldn't have existed if she was home, like she'd said she would be. I set the food down on the kitchen counter and glanced at the wine rack. One bottle missing, 2 glasses in the sink. Lipstick on both rims this time, one pink, one red. My stomach dropped. I moved through the house like I didn't want to disturb it. Like maybe if I stayed quiet enough, the truth wouldn't scream. I made my way to the bedroom, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. It was empty. The bed was made. But something felt off. That's when I noticed her laptop on the dresser. Open. Still running. Her email was up. I don't know what I expected, maybe work stuff, maybe calendar invites. But what I found was worse. Much worse. There were messages, dozens, between her and Greg. Some were innocent on the surface. Quick notes, inside jokes, meeting recaps. But as I scrolled back, the tone shifted. Then came the photos. Nothing graphic, but int asterisk mate. A picture of her in that green dress from the party, mirror selfie, captioned, "This one's for you." Not HR smirking face. Another of them at some rooftop bar, side by side, faces close, wine glasses in hand. The timestamp on that one? A night she told me she had to work late due to client panic. The more I scrolled, the worse it got. The texts weren't just flirty. They were romantic, familiar, casual in the way that only comes from consistency. I read messages that talked about things they'd done, drinks, weekend meetups, even one referencing a hotel downtown. And not just once. It was a thread. They had a pattern. Greg. Wish you were waking up next to me today. Her. Last night was dangerous. And perfect. There it was. In her words. Undeniable. Not a kiss. Not a look. But a confession. On screen. Permanent. I sat on the edge of the bed, still soaked from the rain, scrolling through a life I hadn't been part of. Every message felt like a slap. Every emoji. Every wish you were here. Every timestamp from nights she came home exhausted. I don't remember how long I sat there. At some point, the front door opened. I heard the keys drop into the bowl by the door like always. Heard her call out, "Babe," just like she always did. I didn't answer. She walked in, carrying a reusable grocery bag, talking before she even saw me. "Sorry I took forever. Trader Joe's was a nightmare. I got the oat milk you like though." She froze when she saw the laptop in my lap. Our eyes met. I didn't say a word, just turned the screen toward her. She looked, blinked, looked again. Her face changed so fast I couldn't track it. Confusion, realization, panic. Then the excuses started. It's not what it looks like. I laughed, bitter, hollow. "Is that the official line? Mark, please. Don't." My voice didn't even sound like mine. "Just don't." She stepped forward. "Let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I said, standing up. "It's all right here. You weren't just flirting. You weren't just stressed. You were in a relationship. While married to me." "It wasn't like that," she whispered. "It started off innocent. We were just talking." I shook my head. "You don't just talk at hotels." Silence. She wiped at her eyes, now red and glossy. "I didn't plan for this to happen. I didn't go looking for it." "But you didn't stop it either," I said. She sat down slowly, like her legs had stopped working. I felt disconnected. We were distant. I was lonely. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just stared at her. "So you cheated." Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to sleep with your boss?" Tears ran freely now. "I'm sorry. I know I should have told you. I was scared. I didn't want to hurt you." I almost laughed again. "You didn't want to hurt me? Are you hearing yourself?" She opened her mouth. Maybe to lie again, maybe to defend the indefensible. But I couldn't listen anymore. I walked out. I don't know how long I stood on the front porch, letting the rain soak me again. I just needed space. Anything that didn't smell like her perfume or echo with her apologies. Eventually, I came back in. She was still on the bed, hugging her knees, eyes blank. I looked around the room, at the framed photo of us on the dresser, the coffee mug she made me in our first year, the socks she always left by the nightstand. And I felt like I was standing in someone else's life. "I can't do this," I said quietly. She stood. "Please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can." "No." I shook my head. "You already made your choice. Now I'm making mine." I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the dresser. The click it made against the wood was louder than her sobs. Then I walked upstairs, packed a bag, and left. No final conversation. No dramatic goodbye. Just quiet steps on wet pavement and the knowledge that whatever we'd built had already crumbled. I had just been the last one to notice. I wish I could say I had a plan. That I knew where I was going when I backed out of the driveway that night. A duffel bag in the trunk and my wedding ring left behind like an afterthought. I wish I could tell you it was a brave decision, or even a smart one. But the truth is simpler and uglier. I left because I couldn't breathe. It felt like the walls of our house were closing in on me. Every room soaked in betrayal, every object quietly mocking me with memories of a life that no longer existed. The mug she got me with best husband, etched in fading blue. The throw blanket we fought over on movie nights. The framed copy of our wedding vows hanging in the upstairs hallway. Now just paper and ink wrapped in lies. I couldn't stay. Not for another second. So I drove. With no destination, no GPS, no music. Just the sound of the rain hitting the windshield and the occasional angry squeak of old wipers trying to keep up. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't think. I just moved. The kind of movement your body makes when your mind shuts down to keep itself from breaking. I kept telling myself, just a few hours. Just enough time to cool off, get my head on straight, figure out what comes next. But hours turned into days. I checked into a motel just outside the city. One of those places where the carpet smells like cigarettes and the reception clerk doesn't ask questions. I paid in cash. Told the guy I needed a week. That turned into 2. Then 4. I didn't call her. Didn't text. Didn't leave a note. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't some calculated punishment. I just disappeared. Quietly. Like a ghost who finally realized he'd been haunting the wrong life. People talk about heartbreak like it's loud. Like it's sobbing in the shower or punching walls. But mine was silent. Numb. I sat in that motel room eating microwave dinners and staring at cable reruns like I'd been unplugged from my own body. Days bled together. I slept through alarms. Forgot to eat. Took long walks with no destination. Circling neighborhoods where no one knew my name. I turned off my phone after the first few days. She called. A lot at first. Left voicemails I didn't listen to. Then came the texts, short at first, then longer. Then the photos started. Not of her, but of things. *T of our dog lying on my side of the bed. A picture of my jacket still hanging by the front door. A cup of coffee with 2 sugars, the way I like it, sitting untouched on the counter. I didn't reply to any of it. I didn't want contact. I wanted distance. Distance from the version of myself who had trusted blindly. Distance from the man who thought loyalty guaranteed loyalty. I couldn't look at that guy in the mirror anymore without feeling like I'd failed him. Eventually, I threw the phone in the drawer and stopped checking altogether. I found a temporary gig doing warehouse inventory. Nothing fancy, low pay, long hours, but no people asking questions. No one knew me there. I was just the new guy in boots and a ball cap, counting boxes and unloading trucks. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt still. I rented a cheap 1-bedroom apartment above a closed-down laundromat. The paint was peeling, the pipes groaned, and the windows stuck shut in the humidity. But it was mine. No framed wedding photos. No trace of her. Just silence and space. The kind of space you don't realize you've been craving until it swallows you whole. I started going by my middle name, not officially, just casually. Eli. Something about shedding the old name made it feel like I was shedding the old skin too. Like maybe I could outrun the version of me who got cheated on and lied to and made excuses for someone who didn't deserve them. I didn't reach out to friends. I didn't want sympathy or explanations or, let's grab a beer and talk about it conversations. I didn't want anyone to tell me I'd be okay. I wasn't okay. I wasn't ready to be okay. I just wanted to disappear. And in a way, I did. I lived like that for months. Routine became my religion. Wake up, instant coffee, walk to work, count boxes, microwave dinner, sleep, repeat. There was a kind of peace in the monotony. No sudden changes, no lies, no pretending. Just this stripped-down version of life where everything had edges and weight and none of it could betray me. But peace has a cost. Because even in that quiet, even in that distance, she stayed with me. In flashes, in echoes, a laugh from a stranger that sounded too much like hers. A smell on the bus that reminded me of the perfume she wore to that party. A dream where I'd wake up with her beside me, only to reach out and find cold sheets. I tried to shake it, tried to outrun the memory of her hands, her voice, her betrayal. But memory doesn't care about mileage. One night, I found myself standing outside a bookstore I didn't remember walking to. I was staring through the window at a couple inside. She was flipping through a novel. He was pretending not to stare at her while she talked. I recognized that look. It was the way I used to look at her. Before I knew. Before I saw. I turned and walked away. I started writing things down. Not to publish. Not to share. Just to survive. Journal entries. Scraps of memory. Angry letters I'd never send. Things I needed to get out of my head so they wouldn't rot inside me. It wasn't healing. Not yet. But it was movement. And after months of stillness, movement felt like progress. Then, one day, months after I left, something changed. It was a Saturday. I was at the corner bodega, buying eggs and coffee, when the cashier handed me a small envelope. "Guy dropped this off earlier," he said. "Said it was for you." There was no return address. Just my name. Mark. Not Eli. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. From her. She'd found me. I stood there in that narrow store aisle, surrounded by cheap candy bars and chipped tile floors, holding the past in my hands. My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. It was calm. Too calm. I walked home, set the groceries down, sat on the edge of my creaky bed and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was hers. Loopy, neat, familiar in a way that made my chest ache. The letter didn't beg. It didn't grovel. It was something stranger. "I know you think you know everything," it said. "And I don't blame you for leaving. I don't expect forgiveness. But I need you to know that what you saw, what you think you saw, isn't the whole story. There were things happening you didn't know about. Things I was afraid to tell you even then." I read it twice. 3 times. It didn't excuse anything. But it cracked something open in me I wasn't prepared for. Doubt. Not about the affair. That happened. That was real. But about why. About how much of what I'd lived through was betrayal. And how much of it had been fear, confusion, desperation, or something else I hadn't yet considered. It didn't make me want to run back. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to keep running away. It started with the letter, that single page written in her careful handwriting. Folded neatly, like it had been handled a dozen times before it ever reached me. Like she had practiced what she wanted to say again and again before letting it go. I read it 4 times that night. Not because I was hoping for something different each time. Not because I was looking for loopholes or apologies that weren't there. But because it didn't sound like her. At least, not like the version of her I had built in my head over the last few months. The liar, the manipulator, the woman who had destroyed our marriage and walked away without looking back. This version sounded scared. Not guilty, not defensive, but hollow. Like someone who didn't fully understand her own choices. Like someone unraveling. She ended the letter with, "I don't expect you to respond, but I needed you to hear it from me before you erased me entirely. I'm not proud of what I did, but it wasn't simple. I wasn't simple, and neither were you. I wanted to throw it out, but I didn't. I tucked it into the drawer with the rest of the fragments, the ones I pretended I wasn't keeping." Her last voicemail. The photo of us at our anniversary dinner 2 years ago, where she looked so happy I sometimes doubted whether that version of her ever existed. I told myself it was closure, but maybe I just needed proof that it hadn't all been fake. Then, 2 weeks later, she showed up. No warning. No call. No text. I was walking back from work. It was late, and the streets were mostly empty. Cold air, streetlights flickering. That weird city silence that only happens after dark when even the noise seems tired. And there she was, sitting on the front steps of my apartment building. Same green coat from the party. Different posture. Smaller somehow, like someone had pressed pause on her. I froze halfway across the street, not sure if I was seeing what I thought I was seeing. My first instinct was to turn around, Pretend I didn't see her. Pretend she wasn't real. But she looked up, met my eyes, and everything stopped. She stood slowly, like she was afraid of startling me. Her hair was pulled back, face bare, no makeup, just her. Unedited. Vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen in a long time, maybe ever. "Hi," she said. I didn't answer right away. She tried to smile. It didn't land. "I wasn't sure if you still lived here." I walked up the steps, kept some distance between us. "How did you find me?" She shrugged. "I knew someone at your old job. They mentioned you'd left. I put some things together." Of course she did. She'd always been resourceful, the kind of person who could find the right answer in a haystack of noise. I used to love that about her. I sighed, unlocked the door, held it open without looking at her. "You want to come in? Or is this going to be one of those doorstep confession things?" She hesitated, then nodded, followed me in. The apartment was quiet, dim. I hadn't expected company. There were dishes in the sink, laundry half folded on the couch, a pizza box on the coffee table. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of quiet neglect that fills a life after loss. She took it all in silently. I didn't offer her tea, or water, or anything. We sat, not close, not far, like two strangers in a waiting room, unsure whose name would be called first. "I don't want to make excuses," she said finally. "Good," I said flat. "But I do want to explain." I didn't stop her. I didn't encourage her either. "I didn't come to fix anything," she added quickly. "I know it's probably too late for that. I came because I've been losing my mind, not knowing if you were okay. Not knowing if you hated me, or if you just erased me like I was nothing." "You cheated on me," I said plainly. "What reaction did you expect?" She winced. "I know, and I've been living with that every day since." "Have you?" I asked. "Because it's easy to feel guilty once the house is already burning." She looked down, rubbed her hands together like she was trying to warm herself. "You were gone, just gone. No warning. No goodbye. I woke up and you had vanished." I didn't answer. I didn't owe her a justification. I owed myself space, and I had taken it. She pulled out a folded piece of paper from her coat pocket and handed it to me. A second letter. This one older, yellowed at the creases, like it had been opened and refolded more times than it should have. "I wrote this the morning after you left," she said. "I left it on the kitchen counter. I didn't know you'd be gone before sunrise." I took it more out of reflex than curiosity. She watched me, eyes soft. "I needed you to know the night you found those messages. It wasn't the full picture. It wasn't just about Greg. He wasn't some great love affair. He was just there." I raised an eyebrow. "That's your defense?" "No," she said quickly. "It's not a defense. It's an admission. I was drowning, Mark. And instead of reaching for you, I reached for the closest thing. And it was the wrong thing." "You could have talked to me," I said. "I tried," she whispered. "But you didn't see me anymore." I bristled. "Don't turn this into my failure." "I'm not," she said. "I promise. I'm not saying you're to blame. I'm saying we were already breaking, and neither of us knew how to say it." I looked down at the letter, my name on the front, the same way she used to write it on sticky notes in the kitchen. "I'm not asking for another chance," she said. "I don't even know if I'd say yes to one if you offered. I needed to look you in the eye and tell you that I wasn't trying to destroy us. I was just trying to feel something, anything, and I went about it in the worst possible way." Silence hung between us, thick, heavy. She stood. "I can go. I didn't mean to invade your life again. I just needed you to hear it." She walked toward the door, and for a moment I let her. But something in me shifted. Maybe it was the way her voice cracked when she said my name. Maybe it was the part of me that still remembered how she looked on the day we moved into our first apartment. Full of plans and promises. "Wait," I said quietly. She turned. I didn't have anything profound to offer. No forgiveness. No solution. Just one question. "Were you ever going to tell me? If I hadn't found the emails, would you have come clean?" She looked away, exhaled. Eventually, when I wasn't afraid of what it would mean. That's not good enough, I said. I know. I nodded, sat back down, watched as she opened the door and stepped into the hallway. But the seed had been planted. Not of hope, not of forgiveness, just doubt. Doubt that the version of events I had clung to, black and white, betrayal and innocence, wasn't so simple. And I hated that, because doubt is what opens the door to pain, to understanding, to the kind of truths that don't comfort but clarify. And once that door opens, even a crack, you start to see the parts of the story you weren't ready for. After months of distance, the cracks widened further. Strange things began to happen in the apartment. Objects moved, windows left open, unfamiliar phone notifications. At first, I assumed I was losing my mind, paranoia fueled by betrayal. Then we discovered it wasn't just imagination. Security footage confirmed someone had entered our home. It wasn't Emily and it wasn't Greg. This revelation didn't erase her affair, but it explained the chaos we had both misread as further proof of infidelity. Fear, mistrust, and guilt had magnified the truth into something bigger than it was, leaving us shaken and cautious, aware that our lives had been intruded upon by a third, unseen presence. We didn't return to the old life. We didn't pretend or rebuild the past. Instead, we moved, changed routines, and started anew in a space where honesty replaced silence. The betrayal remained a permanent scar, but fear and avoidance no longer dictated our choices. Our relationship began again, cautiously, without illusions. Trust had to be earned, and forgiveness wasn't immediate. It may never fully arrive. But clarity emerged. A conscious decision to live without lies, without hiding from the truths we had endured. It wasn't happiness. It was something rarer. Freedom from the shadows of betrayal, a chance to define what remained on our own terms.